Yeah, man.
I'm Magua, Panua Jerusalem, standing face Jerusalem. Blessing of the new moon. Barakatha Yahweh, Basham, Yahweh, Ashereh, Nathan Lanawe, Hachadash, Bashalawam, the water, Amen. Blessed are you, Yahweh, name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the new moon in peace. Thank you, so be it. The Ali Ma'ash Sharai Machad, Psalms 121. Gabar, read everything. Anya Ryan. You guys gonna say it with me? Anya Ryan. Anya Harim Mayan. Yabawa Azariah. Yabawa Maya Hawe Shai Shai Shemayim Warataza La Yanathan Lamawat Regalia Yela Yanawam Shashramarka Hanela Yanawam Wala Yashan Shashramar Yasharale Yahweh Shamaria Yahweh Tazalia Ayo Yim Yawamam Hashamash La Hakaya Wayarak La Balayala Yahweh Yashamaria Makam Rai Yashamar Napashe Yahweh Yashamar Hawalake Wabawaya My Fa Wa I will Basham Yahweh Sheth Wade Amen. Mm-hmm.
I will lift up my eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in, from this time forward and even forevermore.
Amen. Shema Yasharala, Hero Israel. Deuteronomy 6 and 4. Shema Yasharala, Yahweh, Eloheinu, Yahweh, Echad. Shema Yasharala, Yahweh, Eloheinu, Yahweh, Echad. Shema Yasharala, Yahweh, Eloheinu, Yahweh, Echad.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And thou shalt love.
No, just say Amen.
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 Thapala Yahweh, the Lord's Prayer. Matthew 6 and 9. Abinawa Shabbat Shemayim Kodash Hayya Shanka Yahweh Malakwafka Taba'a Ratazawanka Hayya Aisha Baratiza Kabashamayim Latamanawa Lakham Yawam Zad Wasalakanawa Kabawafnawa Kasalaknawa Kabawafyanawa Wala Abiyanawa Oh Nasayawan Nabo Hawashinawa Murai Kaya Laka Amalakwa Wa Allah Wa Thaparak Wa Walam Aman.
After this manner, therefore, pray ye.
Call the book, chapter, and verse.
This is the book of Matthew, chapter 6, and verse 9, the Lord's Prayer. After this manner, therefore, pray ye. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. Amen.
Amen. Ha'ai Shara Matazawah, the Ten Commandments. Exodus 20 and 3. La'ad, Yahayat, Lakad, Alahayim, Akarim, Alpanyat, La'ad, Taishat, Lakad, Pasod, Wala'ad, Taibadam, La'ad, Talakwaka, Shamwa, Yahweh, Alahayaka, Lashawat, Zakar, Ath, Hayawam, Hashabath, Lakodashwad, Kabad, Abiyakat, Wa Amakat, La'at, Taratazak, La'at, Tana'ap, La'at, Thaganab, La'at, Thainat, Shakur, La'at, Thachamad, Ko, Asherat, Lara'aika, Amen.
The Ten Commandments, Exodus chapter 20 and 3. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in the heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquities of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the Sabbath day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land, which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's.
Just say Amen.
Amen.
All right, Yeshua, you see it. Barakati Yahweh by Shem Yahweh Shai, Asherana Tanana, Pari Agapin, Thwada Aman. La Yahweh by Shem Yahweh Shai, Yasher Allah. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the fruit of the vine. Thank you, so be it. To Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, with Israel. And Madwa, Panuel Jerusalem, stand and face Jerusalem. Barakati Yahweh, Haggadah, Rakawam, Yabiyah, Wanawa'eh, Aliyawan, Malak, Shamayim, Warataza, Wakadabarim, Kayayam, Wagam, Hamashiach, Mayahawe, Arawanawe, Ahabnawe, Ashsalar. Arawanawe, Ahabnawe, Apale, Yawaitaza, Yahawashai, Zakarnawe, Yahweh, Bartazawan, Ainke, Yashale, Izarnawe, Bane, Wasa, Yashale, o na nawa yam yan I fa kaya wamyam makwadam babakushay shalak Mike Allah watazwadak Alahayim la maganawa rab harnawa washamam Alnawa by shalak Haroka shau Yehawa shai lanawa lala madnawa Rabiam kakama thabawana wada I shau the barka basham Yehawa shai the water tham yed why willam maman. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, the great, merciful, mighty, terrible, most high power, King of heaven and earth and all things living, and also the anointed from Yahweh, our Lord, our friend, the wonderful counselor, Yahweh Shai. Remember us, Yahweh, favorably your people Israel. Help us build and gather Israel, most high, we beg you, right now, like the days of old. Please send Michael and the righteous powers to protect us, heal us, and watch over us. Mainly send the spirit of Yahweh Shai to us to teach us much wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of thy word. In the name of Yahweh Shai, thank you, always and forever, so be it. Repeat the Hebrew only. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the law. Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherat, Latam Lanawa, Hathawarat. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us light to see. Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherat, Latam Lanawa, Award, Larawat. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the ram's horn to call the people. Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherat, Latan Lanawa, Karan, Hayot, La Korab, Ha'aim, Yeshabu, I'll be seated. Somebody get that door. Fizzled out last time. I wonder why. All right, so Shalom Yasharala. All right, so Shalom everybody that's here in Philly. Shalom everybody watching us on live stream, and Shalom everyone listening in on teleconference. Welcome to High Shalakanas, or the Congregation of Israel, where we teach that the descendants of slaves, as well as the indigenous peoples, make up the southern and northern kingdoms of the 12 tribes of Israel. Once lost, now found. And that we fall into a lower state, politically, economically, even religiously, because we broke the laws of God found in the Bible given to us by Moses. And that we come out of this lower state that we fall into by turning back to these commandments that we broke, by following Jesus Christ. As our example, who did no sin, neither was guile found in his mouth. So when we do that is by keeping the the Sabbath day holy, as well as the other high holy days. The one we're keeping right now is the new moon, and the fourth one in particular. So we'll get a couple new moon verses, but then I want to also go into, like we talked about the swordsman's code last time, right? A set of principles that are good when it comes to words, right? As far as how we teach, I have another code which is good. That's not just for, priests, but could be for anyone in Israel as far as deeds. Good things as far as things to think of or behaviors to follow, whether it be our congregation or any other congregation, right? Any other branch of Christ, they can follow these principles. As we'll see in the title, it says the Code of Israel. So it'll be kind of like a review because we went over it some time ago. But it's always good to review in case any of these principles you may have stopped doing. We'll touch on what they are and where to find them in the scriptures. So first, for the new moon, let's go to Numbers chapter 10 and verse 10. And I just say come once you have it. All right, so you have that. So Numbers chapter 10 and verse 10. Okay, so Numbers chapter 10, verse 10, it reads, also in the day of your gladness and in your solemn days and in the beginnings of your months, ye shall blow with the trumpets over your burnt offerings and over the sacrifice of your peace offerings, that they may be to you for memorial before your God. I am the Lord your God. See that? So it says, when in the days of our gladness, which we're in right now, it says, and in your solemn days, right, which is a day also. But then it says even more specifically, in the beginnings of your months. See that? So we're supposed to sound off with the trumpet, as it says next, during special times, be it the Sabbath day, be it the new moon that we're in right now, right? Or if it's a holy day, like we have just get the Passover or Feast of Unleavened Bread last season. Now we're in the southern season, so the Feast of First Fruits is coming up, so you'll see congregations celebrating that. Or in the fall, we have the Feast of Tabernacles, and in the winter, we have the Feast of Dedication, along with other holy days throughout the year as well. So it says, ye shall blow with the trumpets over your burnt offerings. So this is a shawapar, that's how you say it in the ancient Hebrew, a ram's horn, which is a type of trumpet. But you read above in Numbers chapter 10, you'll see we use silver trumpets. It says, over your burnt offerings. It says, and over the sacrifices of your peace offerings, right? These being different offerings that we did when you read in Leviticus chapters 1 through 7. That goes through a list of different offerings that we did, right? And we would do different ones for different reasons. As was instructed to Aaron and his sons that came after him, who would carry on the duty of the priesthood, those of his descendants. It says that they may be to you for memorial before your God. I am the Lord your God. This is supposed to be a memorial, something we do to remember Yahweh. That's why we come together now during the time of the new moon, among other days. But now you may say, okay, it's the beginning of the month. I thought the month began in a couple of days, right? I thought July 1st was the beginning of the month. See, because the powers that be they've incorporated what you call a solar calendar, right? Whereas we use a solar lunar calendar. We use the sun and the moon for different things, right? Sun as far as the time of day and season, but also we use the moon as far as the time of month. So you have to incorporate those heavenly bodies for their purpose. So the new moon is actually the new month when you go into how we kept time according to the scriptures. So just to show that the beginning of the month is the new moon, let's prove that. Let's go to our forefathers who we're reading about now in the Sabbath service, right? We're in 1 Samuel's right now. Let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 20. We haven't gotten there yet, but we will, I think, in the next Sabbath, because we just did probably two more a couple more Old Testament Sabbaths. So probably by the time of like beginning of August, we'll probably read this in the Sabbath services. Right now, we're up to 1 Samuel 18. We're going to go to 1 Samuel chapter 20. 1 Samuel chapter 20. And I'm going to read verse 5. Just say "Con" once you have it. "Con" just means okay or yes, or I understand. So 1 Samuel chapter 20 in verse 5, it reads, "And David said unto Jonathan, Behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I shall not fail to sit with the king at meat, but let me go, that I might hide myself in the field unto the third day at even." So David, he's talking to Jonathan. You go into Jonathan. Jonathan is the son of Saul, who was king, right? But they're really close. But he's telling him that tomorrow is the new moon, because David was a part of Saul's household. One of the laws the kings had was they could call sons and daughters into their care to work for them, right? To be bakers, confectionaries, to be soldiers in the army, right? To do other tasks. So David was called to be his armor bearer after his great feat of delivering Israel from Goliath of Gath, right? So David knows he's going to be expected at the new moon, because we always came together during that time. But he's telling Jonathan he should not fail to sit with the king at meat, but let him go that he may hide himself in the field unto the third day at even. Because what's going on at this point in Samuel's is Saul has an evil spirit that's troubling him, and he seeks to what? Kill David without a cause, right? As David's only done righteous by him. But he's afraid of David because of the Holy Spirit dealing with him and building him up. But now jump down to verse 24. So let's see what actually happens after they make this plan. So verse 24 says, "So David hid himself in the field." It says, "And when the new moon was come, the king sat him down to eat meat." So they came and sat down for the new moon feast, right? It says, "And the king sat upon his seat as at other times, even upon a seat by the wall." It says, "And Jonathan arose, and Abner sat by Saul's side, and David's place was empty." See? So your usual cast of characters was there. Jonathan, his son, Saul's son, was there, the king. And Abner was by Saul's side. Abner was his captain of the host, or like his top general, right? But it says David's place was empty. Then it says in verse 26, "Nevertheless, Saul spake not anything that day, for he thought something had befallen him. He is not clean. Surely he is not clean." So he knew David to be a diligent brother. He probably considered there's got to be a serious reason why he's not here. Maybe he's unclean. Because in the law, there's different reasons we become unclean, but sometimes for a day, sometimes for a week, sometimes as a man, sometimes as a woman, right? You can become unclean for different reasons. So he thought, oh, he must not be clean. That's the reason why he's not here, right? Now check this out. It says in verse 27, "And it came to pass on the morrow, which was the second day of the month, that David's place was empty." That's why I like to read this verse along with what we read in Numbers 10 and 10, because this shows you what? That the beginning of the month is the new moon, because it says the morrow, which was the second day of the month. See that? So if the morrow was the second day of the month, that means the new moon would have had to have been the first day of the month. right? So there's no confusion around how we tell time now versus how we told time according to the scriptures, which we know the Bible is timeless. But, people oftentimes, you mention the Bible, they go, oh, that old book, or you hear the expression, oh, well, they used to do that back in biblical days, right? Back in biblical days, you hear that, you go, back in biblical days, what does that even mean? Right? The Bible's timeless. The Bible deals with yesterday, today, and forever, right? Just like it tells you about Yahweh Shah Mashiach, right? It says Jesus Christ, the same yesterday and today and forever. So God's wisdom never has to evolve, right? It always works. Whether it was the agricultural age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, even what we're into now as far as the agricultural, from agriculture into industrial age, and then from industrial age to the information age, right? As Daniel prophesied, right? In Daniel 12:4, the Most High's laws are still timeless, right? They always work, right? Regardless of the technology, regardless of the infrastructure, right? What we know about, the physical world around us, the laws have never they've never been needed to be adapt. They would never have to adapt to the change of technology. No, they're always perfect because those that created us, right? They've always been above and beyond. Even no matter what we've come up with in these latter times, it still can't compete with the technology that the Elohim have, right? And the abilities that they have, and those abilities that even we have within us when we really tap into the Holy Spirit, right? Like healing the sick, cleansing the lepers, raising the dead, right? Certain feats of strength, calling fire from heaven. These are things that we still can't do, even with the technology that we have, right? The way we can do it with just using ourselves, using our own body, but with the Holy Spirit on us. So the Holy Spirit can't be touched yet, still. So these are things we're always supposed to do. And we're supposed to do this in the future also, which is why I always like to go to this one at the end of Isaiah. So this is Isaiah chapter 66. Isaiah 66 in verse 23. Once again, Isaiah 66 and 23. Just say come once you have that. All right. So second to last verse in Isaiah 66 and verse 23, it says, and it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord, or saith Yahweh. So this is a future prophecy. This still hasn't come to pass, which means this is still to take place. It's like I was saying earlier, the Most High's laws are timeless. They never have to evolve, right? The laws always work, always put us at balance with the rest of the Most High's creation. So what we have now is a lot of technology, a lot of technological advancement, right? When it comes to industry, when it comes to technology, when it comes to communications, right? Energy, right? We have all these things, yet the creation's out of balance, right? The creation's being hurt or harmed. Because why? The laws aren't there. The powers that be aren't implementing the laws with the technology, right? So that's where we see, what they now call climate change. Before that, global warming, right? Or things heating up, or animals dying off, or certain, not just animals, but even plants, fauna and flora becoming extinct, right? These are all part of what? Not dealing with the law, which shows us how to what? Not cause animals to go extinct, how to not exploit the environment, right? So that's why. But it says, there's another verse in Isaiah that talks about that, but it says in Isaiah 66 and verse 23, once again, it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith Yahweh. So it's going to come a time where everyone's going to know to what? Come and keep this day. Not just the new moon, but also the Sabbath day, which comes every week, right? Just like America being the top empire on the earth now, right? Which we see that's starting to dwindle, right? It's actually been dwindling these last couple of decades, but it's getting worse and worse. for America. But when it comes to American customs and practices, right, you'll see people acknowledge them across the world, right, across the continents, from Europe to the Middle East to Africa to Asia, right, to South America, Central America. You'll see them acknowledging the so-called Christian customs of, say, Christmas or Easter, or they'll even acknowledge, oh, this is the United States, July 4th. They celebrate their independence today, right? Now, they'll acknowledge it, but they may not keep something like that, obviously, right? That's like a trick question you ask the British, right? Or those that live in the UK, where you're talking about, the Irish, the Scottish, the Welsh, the English. Do you guys keep July 4th, right? Of course, they're going to say no, because, the history, right? It's like, why would I celebrate you guys get independence? We lost, right? Lost. Because there's ultimately this empire had to rise due to the prophecy. And, the Most High was ultimately behind that. But anyway, these are days that people know about. But when it comes to the new moon and the Sabbath, some folks know about it, but it's not a worldwide thing. But it will be in the kingdom, because we're going to be the ones that set up the laws, and everyone's going to be able to come to Israel to learn those laws, those that remain after the Third World War. You see? But yeah, as far as things being ravaged, let me just get this real quick. This is Isaiah chapter 24. I'm going to read verses 4 to 6. Isaiah 24 and verse 4, just say, come what you had then. It reads, Isaiah 24, verse 4, it says, the earth mourneth and fadeth away, the world languisheth and fadeth away. The haughty people of the earth do languish. It says, verse 5, the earth also is defiled under the inhabitants thereof. But now it's going to tell us why. Because they had transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, broken the everlasting covenant. You see that? So when we go off as a nation, that's where it's musical chairs for these other nations to rise and fall in due time, because without the law, your kingdom always has a shelf life, no matter what nation you are, no matter how smart you are, no matter how well you learned how to harness the power of nature, right? Like you see now, it won't matter without the law as your guideline. This is going to happen. That's why it says in verse 6, therefore hath the curse devoured the earth, and they that dwell therein are desolate. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men left. See that? So, world's on fire, figuratively and literally, right? From things getting hot, literally, right? Like we see, different forest fires causing deforestation. Shoot, we're on fire, right? In chemistry, they refer to it as oxidation, right? Which is like the same process that metal undergoes, which is they call rust, or what they call within our body, which is the aging process, right? Because we come from the dust, right? So we're carbon based, right? Like it says in chemistry, carbon is what makes up most of the rocks, right, that you find in the earth, right, are made of carbon. So it's only natural that we will be based in that element too, since we're made from the dust. But we're not supposed to die, right? The sin is the reason why we age and grow old. From hundreds of years down to 120 years around the time of the flood, and from 120 even down to 70 years as far as how long a man would live. Now we make it to a century. We think, people just clap their hands and go, oh, wow. We had someone that lived to be 100 years old. Wow, they lived a long life. But once again, it's like, that's really horrible, because at 100 years old, most sides still looks at us like we're a child, like we're a baby, like we're just getting started. It's like having a car, but then, you don't change the oil, you don't do maintenance on it and things like that, and it wears down. Whereas you do maintenance on it, it can last a whole long, quite a while. When it comes to this body, if we were dealing with the laws and dealing with them perfectly, this body wouldn't age, right? We would continue on. That's how it's going to be in the kingdom when the Most High puts the law on the inward parts, because once we know the law and keep it always, there won't be any need for that body to be defiled or get old. You have examples of some of us that even beat the odds, even though Adam and Eve sinned, like Enoch, for example, who was translated because of his righteousness. Or even like someone like Moses, even though he died at 100 years old, talks about how his eye didn't get dim, nor did his natural force abate. So just imagine the high level Moses was on, to where even at 120 years old, he was still in top physical condition, right? But this is what our bodies are supposed to do. But, in Esau's world where sin is popular, people talk about, oh man, I'm 35, I'm getting old, right? And it's just like, really? No, you just driving the car without changing the oil, Now you're wondering why the engine's sputting out on you, right? Because without the law, we misuse this body. And that's why it breaks down so quick. But that's its own class. But also, I referred to this in Isaiah as well. This is in the beginning of Isaiah. Isaiah's pretty popular right now. Just read as one of the verse, and then I'll get those principles I was talking about that any Israelite can use or Israelite tests. So this is Isaiah chapter 2. So let me know when you have that. Isaiah chapter 2, I'm going to start from verse 2. So Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 2 reads, the word that Isaiah, the son of Amoz, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem, right? Talking about us, talking about our capital city. Verse 2, it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of Yahweh's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it. So once again, another future prophecy, something that hasn't happened yet, right? When it says mountain and hills, when you read other scriptures, mountain and hills is just a metaphor for nations, governments, right? They're referred to as mountains and hills. So it says all nations shall flow unto it. This is going into when what? Jerusalem in Israel is going to be the top city on the planet. Just like today, they'll look at a place like Washington, D.C. and go, oh, wow, D.C., America's capital. Right? This is where it all goes down, right? Most powerful country in the world. But no, it's talking about in the kingdom when we're the most physically powerful nation in the world. Spiritually, we're still the most powerful, but due to our sin and transgression, we've severed that connection. But more and more of us are waking up, thank goodness. It says in verse 3, and many people shall go and say, come in, let us go up to the mountain of your Lord, or Yahweh, to the house of the power of Jacob. And he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem. So now our laws are going to be established, right? Our customs and practices are going to be established in the earth at that time, right? We'll be the most popular holy days to keep. Everyone is going to know about, oh, it's the Jews' Passover right now. Oh, it's the Pentecost right now, right? It's the Feast of Tabernacles. The world's going to know it and acknowledge it. It's going to be popular, whereas now it's more of a fringe thing to do as far as doing it the right way. Because you got the so-called Jews that try to do these things, and they're always days off because their calendar's wrong, or they got the Torah, they got our Torah, but then they mix it with their Talmud, right, which has them say and do the worst things against the Torah, or Thawara in the ancient Hebrew. So doing these things the right way, being instructed how to do it by the right people, God's actual chosen people, that's what this is talking about. It says in verse 4, and he shall judge among the nations, and shall rebuke many people, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. So that's important, right? When it says, they shall judge the nations, rebuke many people, and beat their swords into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks. We don't already know. Spears and swords are weapons of war. But then plowshares and pruning hooks are what? Tools that farmers and husbandmen use, right? Whether you're planting crops in the field or grapes in a vineyard. So it's going into what? As we're about to read, the times of war coming to an end, But then the times of what? Building and growing things is going to come, right? That's why it says, nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. So those times will be at an end after that Third World War, right? There won't be any more nations going against nations like that. You might still have those that resist the Most High's law, and the scriptures are going to that. But as far as what we see now, as far as entire nations going to war, back and forth, so it's a future prophecy. And we use this too to show those people in the land now can't be the Jews. Because if it was, this should have happened already, right? It should have been happened since they decided to put themselves in there being being identity thieves, put themselves in there and having the British sign that, was it Balfour Declaration to say, yes, the state of Israel. And it's not even really God's people. We always quote, even though he's another nation, we always quote Gabal Abdel Nasser, right? Ishmaelite, one of the past presidents of Egypt, he has that famous quote where he says, the Jews will never have peace in the land because they left black and came back white, right? It's funny because, Esau even had him a man of the year one year. I forget what decade it was, but he has that quote. But at the same time, while they'll say they're not the Jews, they won't come out like that en masse. They'll acknowledge it. Ishmael, the so-called Arabs, will acknowledge it, but they won't come out en masse saying, yes, they're God's chosen, right? But they'll see us, sitting like an Arabian in the wilderness, like it says in Jeremiah. And they'll say, oh, assalamu alaikum. Yes, assalamu alaikum. Right? Because they know us following their religion is going to make them stronger. Whereas we follow our own God according to our own laws, that's when the show is over. They say, hey, if you want to follow us, hey, I'm cool with that. As long as I can pay my bills and, get more wealth, get your wealth, and have you, buy my products and services, I'm all for it. Let me read verse 5 and then we'll continue on. It says, O house of Jacob, come ye and let us walk in the light of Yahweh. So let's walk in that light, the light being the law, the scriptures, right? Like it tells us in many other scriptures. The Bible being like a lamp, the law being like a light or like a flame, you see? But as you'll see in the title, once again, the video, the Code of Israel, I call it, right? I give it that general name, even though before I called it the Code of HYK, but like I said, we're just one of many branches of Christ, right, that are out there teaching the truth about who we are as a people, why we fell in the lowest state, and then what we need to do to get out of it, right, as it pertains to Christ. But these principles are timeless principles that always work, that we can do even now before this time in Isaiah chapter 2 we just read. We look forward to these days, just like we look forward to the days we just read about in Isaiah 6 and 23. But until then, because we don't know how long we'll be in this kingdom, these are best practices that we can always follow that will always keep us in tune. If we're traveling long distances or if, we're apart from other brothers and sisters, as long as we keep the spirit by keeping the scriptures, keeping the commandments on us and following them and putting these practices into play, we should be okay. We won't, as they say, fall off the horse, but we got to do it. So first in this list, I put them in a particular order. It doesn't mean you have to follow them in this particular order. I just arranged them this way, right? And I gave them time frames that just considering it, I use the word, I worded a certain way where I say at least, which means you can go over what I say. But the point is, as far as the frequency in doing these particular best practices, that's what you want to make sure that you do. I have you start at least, and as you get used to that, you can do more. Just like, you've been away from the gym for a while, you just don't go in there and start, putting all the weight on the bar and just start pumping, right? Because you'll pull something. You start small, get used to that, and you add on. That's why you'll see with these first couple of principles that I named, I use the term at least. So principle number 1, right? which is study the scriptures at least 1 hour a day, right? So that's the principle number one, right? In this code of Israel. So study the scriptures at least 1 hour a day. Now, could you do more? Sure. But I just say, just start off with an hour because, whether you work for someone else or you have your own business, right? You might be busy doing different things. That's fine. But at least just have an hour somewhere set aside in your 24 hours, whether it's first thing in the morning or if it's during lunchtime or right before you go to bed, whatever time frame works for you based on your schedule. Find this time to get this in. You might break it up into pieces, 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there, 15 minutes later on, right? But always have that principle to what? At least 1 hour a day, study the scriptures, right? Which means what? Going over your notes that we talk about in the class, right? Or reading or studying new scriptures, right? It means both. So you want to incorporate both of those. So scriptures you can use for this first principle, which is study the scriptures 1 hour a day. You can write down Joshua chapter 1 and verse 8. Joshua chapter 1 and verse 8. Just let me know when you have it. Just say come once you have Joshua 1 and 8.
Time.
You got it too? Is he still getting it? Just say come once you have it also.
Come.
Uh-huh.
All right. So Joshua chapter 1 and verse 8, it says, this book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success. You see that? So you want it to be a constant meditation to consider and to do the commandments, right? And that could be quoting the verse, but that could also just being the verse, doing the verse, right? To where it just becomes like second nature. But before you can do it, you have to learn it, practice it, have the knowledge of it, be able to not only have the wisdom behind the verse, but then also have the knowledge of where to find it. And then just become it, where people see you doing the commandments and it's like, oh, something different about that brother or sister. Hey, I'm wondering, what's this about? What are we into? Or why are you wearing that? Or I saw how you dealt with that elderly person. Wow. Tell me more about, what you know. You'd be surprised that the Most High will have certain folks even come up to you just by you being in this. Because there's a spirit behind this. This is also echoed in Psalms. Go to Psalms now, chapter 1. Psalms chapter 1. I'm going to read verses 1 to 3. Just say comment, y'all have that. So Psalms chapter 1 and verse 1. So it reads Psalms chapter 1, verse 1. Blessed is a man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, or Yahweh, right? So blessed is the man that doesn't what? Walk in the counsel of the ungodly, meaning taking advice for those who don't want to deal with God, nor stand in the way of sinners, those who break the commandments, right? Nor sit in the seat of the scornful, right? Folks always said something negative to say. But his delight is in the law of Yahweh. It says, and in his law doth he meditate day and night, just like we read in Joshua. So the author of this psalm here has that same idea that Joshua had, which is that righteousness. Always be considering the commandments, right? We see that in Deuteronomy also, it talks about this, right? It says in verse 3, and he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water that bringeth forth his fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. See that? This man will be like a tree planted by rivers of water that bring forth fruit in his season, right? So like a fruitful tree, right? As opposed to like a tree that looks old and dry, right? That looks like it needs help, needs some water, needs some sunlight. It's like the opposite of that. So that's how that man will be. So you want to meditate on the law day and night. Always be considering it. Always be studying it. Always be doing it. But like I said, a good practice is just 1 hour a day, right? If you're already doing that, great. If you're not, work up to that and then see if you can go above that. But also, let's get Acts. Let's go to Acts chapter 17 on this too. Acts chapter 17, and then we're going to read verses 10 and 11. Just say come once you have that.
Who's that verse? 17 2?
10.
Come.
You got it written down, right? This is Acts 17 and 10. It reads, and the brethren immediately sent away Paul and Silas by night unto Berea, who coming thither went into the synagogue of the Jews, right? So it's going into when Paul was doing the work, right? Him and his other brother named Silas, who was helping him, it says they went to another city called Berea, right? And they went to the synagogue of the Jews that was there. But then it says, these, referring to those brothers and sisters that were in Berea, were more noble than those in Thessalonica, right? That's where they were traveling from. That was that book he wrote to the Thessalonians, right? It says, in that they received the word with all readiness of mind and searched the scriptures daily whether those things were so. So the brothers that and sisters that were in Berea had better habits, right? To where it says daily, they would make, as you went to the synagogue, they would study what he was saying and check it, prove it, go through it, right? But you notice there it was like, okay, these folks here have a different spirit as opposed to those in Thessalonica. Those in Thessalonica, I kind of have to hold their hand, walk them through some things. They're not getting it. Whereas these folks in Berea, they're on point. They got it. It's kind of ironic that there's no letter to the Bereans, right? Because you probably only had to go maybe there once, set the table, so to speak, as far okay, here's what we're doing, and then they were off to the races. So, okay, you guys are good. And other letters he had to write to folks that had some troubles, but it's all good, right? As long as we get there. So yeah, we see examples of Bereans. We want to be like the Bereans, right? Daily studying the scriptures. So let's go to principle number 2. So that was the first principle, right? Which is study the scriptures at least 1 hour a day. So the second principle, right? We were just having this conversation last week, means me the other Kahanya. Pray at least 3 times a day. That's the second principle. Pray at least 3 times a day. Could you pray more than that? Sure. But I say at least, right, is a good frequency, right? At least 3 times. Now I'm about to read a couple scriptures where we see that it was customary that we'll pray at 3 particular times of the day, right? Now, does this mean that you have to do it at those times? No. But is it bad? Of course not. It's not like a thing like you see with other cultures where they have a fixed time that they always pray. But it was definitely customary that we did it when we look at some of our great forefathers. First example, let's go back to Psalms 55. Psalms 55 in verse 17. This being a Psalm of David. We're reading about now, seeing how these well, in the Sabbath service now, his story is kind of just beginning so far what we've read. But he dealt with a lot of afflictions, right? But even though he got afflicted, we see how he overcame. He always put the Most High's principles first. 17. So Psalms 55 and 17 say, "Come when y'all have that." So once again, we got study the scriptures at least 1 hour a day is our first principle in our code of Israel. Second principle, pray at least 3 times a day. As I explained earlier, if you just joined us, I'm going to use these first couple of principles. I'm going to use at least just to kind of set a baseline. Could you go above? Sure. I'm not making it fixed. Like I said, these are just righteous advice based on scriptures. So it's not me saying it. All I'm just doing is arranging what God already said in a way we kind of look at it and consider it and then apply it more readily. I'm giving you the scriptures you can use as far as the inspiration for these principles are coming from. You see that in the world, right? On social media, people post, different posts with, quote of the day, motivational speech, motivational, ideas or thoughts. And when you study the scriptures, you can see a number of those come right from the Bible. Other times not, but you'll see they won't be giving the Bible that credit. Sometimes they do with the so-called Christian words of the day. But then look at those long enough, some will be on point, others might be misplaced. It's like a certain gospel. You can listen to it and go, oh, this is on point. If you know the truth about what this praise is really about. But if you don't, it could be a crutch to others. So Psalms 55 and 17, it reads, "Evening and morning and at noon will I pray and cry aloud, and he shall hear my voice." Right. So we see here David mentioning in the evening time, in the morning time, and at noontime will he pray. So chief points of the day, right? Or chief watches of the day, which you read in the scriptures and go into history. You'll see we broke down time into watches, right? You had 12 hours a day and 12 hours a night. We broke those watches down into 3 watches of 4 hours. The Romans later on, you see that in the Gospels, they broke it down into 4 watches of 3 hours. So, choose what you will as far as how you tell your time. But all in all, the advice here is to what? Those key points of the day, when you begin your day, the midpoint of your day, as the day comes to a close. It was customary that we would pray during these times. But not just David. Let's look at another great prophet. Let's see what he did. Go to Daniel chapter 6. Daniel chapter 6. In verse 10. So Daniel chapter 6 and verse 10, it reads, "Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house." The writing being, they passed some crazy law to try to jam him up, saying that only the king of Persia can pray, but no one else can pray. You read above. But what did Daniel do regardless? Because I've had this question asked me before. Well, do we listen to man's law or God's laws? And I tell them, you listen to man's laws up until or save when man's laws will suggest or compel you to do something against the Most High's law. That's where you draw the line. That's where our forefathers drew the line. No matter what wicked empire it was. And we see Daniel's going to do that, so we can follow his righteous example. Once again, Daniel chapter 6, verse 10. "Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he did aforetime." Right? So not only how many times we see here, right? Like we saw with David, but we also see here, where did he pray, right? And in which direction? It says toward Jerusalem. So we see with the other nations, namely I'm thinking of Ishmael, with their Islam, we see that they adopted this from us, but then just switched it to where they got the Kaaba stone in Mecca, right? They had them face towards Mecca. Instead of doing the 3 times like we did, they do it 5 times, right? This was centuries before, probably almost there in their millennia, a whole millennium before Islam was even a thing, right? We had the Hebrews, our ancestors, doing this 3 times a day towards Jerusalem. Now we were there, great, but if we were in captivity, and King Solomon talks about this, facing towards where the city is, right? Facing towards Israel. For us, it would be in the east. Now, if we were in the Middle East or the Far East somewhere, we would face west. Or if we were in Africa somewhere, we would face north, right? So it depends on where you're at in the earth, which way you face. But you face toward Jerusalem. So we did that first. Also, James. James chapter 5 and verse 16. On the importance of prayer. So you guys have that?
No.
So this is James chapter 5 and verse 16. It reads, "Confess your faults one to another and pray one for another, that ye may be healed. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth or helpeth much." See that? So it says, confess your faults one to another and pray one for another, that ye may be healed. Right? So you see other brothers and sisters that may be strong in an area, we may be weak, right? Confess to them and ask, brother, sister, I want to get better at this. How do I do this, right? Or I have this issue or this temptation I'm dealing with. What'd you do to overcome it? Right? You'd be surprised that the brother or sister might have went through that same thing some years ago, maybe just some months ago. And they might have a method that may work for you too. Well, here's what I did to overcome this, right? Here's how often I prayed. Or here's how often I fasted to overcome whatever this is, right? Let me not talk about fasting yet. We're going to get there. It says James 5:16. Notice what it says also. The effectual, fervent prayer of a righteous man. So you don't want your prayers to be abomination. It tells you in Proverbs, what? He had turned his ear away from hearing the law. It says, even his prayer shall be abomination, right? See, a lot of our people and the heathen, they'll pray to God, who they think is God, but because they're breaking the law, it's like it falls on deaf ears. So this is 1 Thessalonians 5:17. You can add to this. So 1 Thessalonians 5:17. Make sure you have that written, all these written down too. These are all for the second principle. So 1 Thessalonians 5:17, it reads, pray without ceasing. See that? That's why I said at least 3 times. So we got Psalms 55:17 and Daniel 6:10 about how they did it during key times of the day, right? So if you want to do that and then more than that, great. You got a verse for that too. 1 Thessalonians 5:17. Pray without ceasing. You guys see that? Kanla. Makes sense? If it doesn't make sense, just stop me. So now on to number 3. This is a fun one, right? Or not so fun one, depending on how you are when it comes to other people. Number 3 is tell at least one brother or sister you don't know about the truth once a day. I'll say it again. Tell someone you don't know, a brother or sister actually, you don't know about the truth at least once a day. Once again, for folks that might be a little antisocial, right? This might be a tough one, right? But it's a practice that yields great rewards for anyone that's done it. If you do more than that, great, right? So even if you don't go out and teach formally, right? Or hand out flyers, right? Formally, like with the camp, you can still do this, right? You don't even have to be a priest to do this. Even with the milk of the scriptures, you can do this. If it's not once a day, if you know you might be away from folks for a certain period of time, you could have just 1 or 2 days where you get your 7 people, right? The hope being that you get at least one person that you lock in. And then from that person, you can branch and gain others, right? But this being a constant practice, it'll keep you on point, because how can you talk to the truth about others and then you yourself aren't following the commandments, right? You yourself are slipping up. It's going to feel like weird, right? It's going to feel awkward. Hey, bro, you know what the Israelites, we're supposed to be following God's laws. And you're like, damn, I just came from getting high. I'm telling somebody about keeping the commandments. So like it helps enforce your behavior too, as far as your righteousness. If you got a temptation you're succumbing to, it's going to make it hard for you to what? Talk to folks about the truth. So it helps others, but it helps you too at the same time, whether you realize it or not. So for number 3, once again, tell at least one brother or sister you don't know about the truth at least once a day. Write these down. Proverbs chapter 11 and verse 30. I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit too, because I know it's late and it's a weekday. So I'm trying to get through all these verses, but definitely watch this video again if you don't catch everything. Or, play it by, play it in slower speed or 1.5 speed if you want to get through it so you can get all these verses. If you had to, had to close it out because you might have to get up in the morning or something like that, just make sure you go over these verses. So Proverbs chapter 11 in verse 30, which reads, "The fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and he that winneth souls is wise." It's like we read it earlier in Psalms 1, right? He's going to be like a tree by the waters, right? That bears his fruit. It says the fruit of the righteous is a tree of life. So that's that metaphor. That's what that's talking about back in Genesis. But then the last precept says, "And he that winneth souls is wise," right? So you're wise if you win souls over for the righteous side, right? You make a compelling statement or argument as far as why we should follow the truth. Also, Daniel chapter 12, still in this principle 3, about telling someone you don't know about the truth, namely a brother or sister. Because remember, we're waiting on Christ, but really Christ's waiting on us. Like I said, you could be all by yourself, right? No, not a part of any camp. Brothers and sisters could be far away from you. If you were just to do this, that's 365 souls, 354 souls in the lunar calendar, right? That have been warned about the truth. If you were to keep this principle just for 1 year. So that's doing the work. May not even feel like doing the work after a while, right? It just becomes like a second nature. If everybody was doing that, we'll be out of here already. Christ will already be coming back. But this is Daniel chapter 12 and verse 3. It says, "And they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever." You see that? So the hell with the Hollywood stars, right? Because America's already finished. America's already going up in flames. Her judgment is already sealed. These are the kind of stars we want to be, right? We want to be these shining stars in righteousness, not for the vanity of the world. Like we see people, doing the worst, compromising their own values just to be a star in this world. So that's Daniel 12 and 3. So you turn many to righteousness, you'll be like the stars forever and ever. If you be wise, you'll be the brightest of the firmament. So we can also go to Matthew. Let's write down Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5. I want to start from 43. And I'll read to the end. 43 down to 48, I believe, is the last verse here. So chapter 5, verse 43, which reads, "Ye have heard that it have been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy." So Christ pointing back to what was said in the 5 books of Moses, right? Verse 44, "But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despisefully use you and persecute you." Right? So Christ is pretty much weighing the laws and the balance, right? Saying, while hating your enemy, you do well as far as the other nations. But the context here is talking about the enemies of your people, right? That you might be at odds with. Because the laws go into that too. You're going to be at odds with your brother or sister at one time or another. But the commandment's good into what? What to do about it when that happens. So it's going to happen. That's why the laws are there. It's all about what you do to resolve the issue, right? So, it's not like, oh my God, how could you be how could you be at odds with your brother or with your sister? No, those are going to happen. That's why the Most High already talks about it. He starts off laws that way. If 2 men strive together, that's how the law begins. Let you know, there's going to come a situation when you guys might be striving together for one reason or another. Here's what you do when that happens. Most High has those laws in place. But now Christ is telling us best practices, right? which law to apply and what laws to hold up higher than others, right? Because the laws aren't only about doing right versus doing wrong. The laws are also about doing well versus doing better. He wants us to show us how to not only just do well, but to do better when it comes to situations. You had your hand up?
Yeah. I wanted to ask in reference to that, is that always, whenever you use the word loving your enemies, is that always referring to Israel?
In this context, that's what he's talking about.
Right.
But would that apply to the nations?
Right.
Sure. Because what's love? The commandments, right?
Right.
Because you see the word love, you think, oh, that means I'm supposed to hug Esau or hug Moab, right? Or kiss Ham in the cheek, right? Give him the holy kiss, right? Like it says in the one with the letters of Paul. No, you're supposed to tell them the truth too, because like we do every time we're out there teaching on the weekends, right? We're doing them a favor. They get mad at us, but it's like, yo, I'm actually showing you love, heathen, because your nations are lied to you. Like it tells in Jeremiah 16:19. Your fathers have inherited lies. But we're actually showing love by telling you who you are and what you're to look forward to, right? And we tell you to tell our people the truth because they won't hear it from one of us, one of our own people. But a heathen telling them, yo, you guys are a Hebrew. Our people are what me? Really? They'll listen when a heathen tell them. That's why anytime we get a heathen that comes up, what can I do to help you guys? Tell our people the truth and tell your people to stop sinning, even though the commandments weren't given to you. Tell them to stop and write letters to your Congress, write letters to these organizations that advise Congress, like CFR and Bilderberg Group and Chatham House. They got this place called Chatham House over here in England. They got these big think tanks. Write these folks and tell them, yo, you guys need to stop oppressing God's chosen people in the Americas, man. You guys need to stop putting money into that fake state called Israel. You tell them, because we've been telling them. That's love. So, yeah. Well, we always read with the Syrophoenician woman, right? That was love, what Christ showed her, right? Because he dealt with her according to the commandments. And even when she humbled herself, when he referred to as a dog, which the scriptures already do when it comes to the other nations, she humbled herself even on that level. That's why he said, wow, great is that faith. As you will it, so it shall be, right? He's not, because Christ isn't a tyrant, right? He's a righteous ruler. He rules with justice. That's why in the kingdom, when it's all said and done, the heathen are going to love to serve us because we're going to rule them according to justice, not like how the heathen do, where they respect persons, take bribes, do other things that go against justice. Because we'll be in power with Christ at the helm, and we won't be able to sin. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
So here, yes, it's talking about, in context, it's speaking specifically to those of your nation. But does it apply to the heathen? Yes. But you just got to explain to folks what it means to love your enemy, right? Because you're going to deal with them according to righteousness, right? Which is not only showing the commandments, but then also apply the fruit of the spirit. Apply the fruit of the spirit as needed, right? Whether it be faith, patience, experience, brotherly kindness, meekness, etc., etc., etc. It says, do good to them that hate you and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, right? Because your hope is that what? Your brother or sister, they repent, even if they're following the ways of the heathen when you do tell them the truth. Verse 45, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven, for he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust, right? So we all see gray skies and blue, right? Not to quote the was that TV show? I used to come on when I was a kid. It was way before me. The Happy Days. They talk about goodbye gray skies, hello blue. So whether you have blue skies or rainy skies, right? You're gonna see that whether you're righteous or you're wicked. But all in all, you do well, you do better by what? Showing that love, which is being shown that righteousness to not only those that know the truth, but those that don't. Once again, like the principle says, a brother says you don't know. Verse 46, for if you love them which love you, what reward have ye? Do not even the publicans the same? Don't the tax collectors do the same thing? And there was a certain stigma about them at that time where it's like, oh, you're a publican. You working for the man, the Romans, right? He said even they do that. Christ is calling us to a higher calling. It says, and if you salute your brethren only, what do you more than others? Do not even the publicans so? So the same idea, right? So you got to go to those that don't know, right? That may be following or might be in a Gentile frame of mind. Show them. In a situation called for it, yeah, even a heathen, show them too, right? Because the love of God shall abound. That's his righteousness. For us, God's people, and for the heathen too. Because everyone needs to learn the lessons that this Bible's talking about. Verse 48, I'll stop here. Be therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect, right? So even though we make mistakes, Christ is saying what? To be perfect, to strive for that perfection. And how do we be perfect? According to the Bible, we try to keep the laws to the best of our ability. That's what the Bible itself says. The law of the Lord is perfect. Let's go back to Acts 17 again. We were just there. Acts 17. We're going to get verses 16 and read 17. So Acts chapter 17. In verse 16. Acts chapter 17 and verse 16, it reads, now, while Paul waited for them at Athens, it's one of my favorite chapters of Acts, right, when Paul was in Athens. While Paul waited for them in Athens, his spirit was stirred in him when he saw the city wholly given to idolatry. So he went there and he saw everybody dealing with idols. Oh, my God. What a surprise, right? Athens being adopted by the Romans, but the Greek history was still there, right? And all the idols that they dealt with, among other things. It says in verse 17, therefore disputed he in the synagogue with the Jews and with the devout persons, and in the market daily with them that met with him. See that? So daily he was out there doing the work, teaching, edifying, right? That's why I said at least once a day, right? At least tell somebody. That's why you'll see throughout the major cities, Philadelphia notwithstanding, where you find our branch of Christ as well as other branches of Christ, right? On Market Street, right? We got like 4 or 5 camps now on Market Street in Philly, right? On any given Sabbath, right? So that's a good thing. It should be like that in every city where Israel's been scattered throughout the Americas, right? Because until we have more and more camps out there, right? Affiliated, not affiliated, right? Doing the work, we can't get out of here. So the more, the merrier. It says Acts 17, verses 16 and 17. And then let's get this one too. 2 Timothy chapter 2, write this down. 2 Timothy chapter 2. In verse 2. So 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2. It reads, and the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also. See that? So Paul to Timothy, right? A next up and coming bishop. He became a bishop himself, head over his own church. He said, the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the things I've been teaching, commit those things to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also, right? So have this to be teach a whole bunch of folks, but then still have like an inner circle of faithful men who you know can do the work and teach like you're teaching, that are called to teach. And then another one, and we'll move on to the next principle. It's actually a couplet. Let me read these two together. First, get First Peter, or write down First Peter 4:8. First Peter chapter 4 and verse 8. So First Peter chapter 4 and verse 8, it says, and above all things have fervent charity among yourselves, for charity shall cover the multitude of sins. See that? So one of the fruits of the Spirit about charity, which is loving your neighbor. And apparently, like Christ said, loving your enemy too. So for those in Israel you get along with, those you don't get along with. And even the heathen, they straggle along. Yeah, tell them too. But our focus being on our people, especially, right? Especially those of our people that don't know any better. It says that shall cover the multitude of sins. What's this charity? What's charity in its highest form that covers a multitude of sins? Because you hear the word charity in the world, you think, oh, soup kitchens, right? Or, clothing drive. Those things are well and good. That's charity, yes. But what's better than feeding someone or clothing someone physically? Feeding someone, clothing someone spiritually. So you feed or clothe someone physically, you do well. You feed and clothe someone spiritually, you do better. James chapter 5 and verse 20, the last verse. That goes with 1 Peter 4 and 8. James chapter 5 and verse 20, it says, let him know that he which converteth the sinner from the error of his way shall save the soul from death and shall hide a multitude of sins. See that? So in case you're wondering what this charity is that Peter's talking about, his fellow disciple James showed us at the end of his letter. That's why I would like to read those two together. Okay, so let's move on to number 4, which is converse with one another, right? I say converse, not conversate. I know we popularized the word compensate from conversation, but conversate is not proper English, right? It's actually converse. But you still hear people say, yeah, conversate. Yeah, we was conversating, but it's actually converse. So converse with one another by school, phone, or email at least once a week, right? So converse with one another by phone, school, or email by once a week, right? Hence the inspiration for, mass mails or social media or group chats, right? Whether it be on MMS or Telegram or, what's the other one they have? WhatsApp, right? Try to find a medium that, everyone can use, right? That everyone's on. Because sometimes, depending on how old the folks are that in your group, they may not be tech savvy, right? So at least with like group MMS, most folks will be able to at least have access to that if you don't reach out to them directly, right? This one could be somewhat difficult sometimes depending on your schedule, depending on, what demands you kind of have on your job. Some jobs will allow you to be on the phone or allow you to text, other ones won't, right? So at least try to find that quiet time to do this. This is where these mediums like technology, like we talked about, email, phone, social media, these things are actually beneficial, right? They're just tools. And it can be misused as we see all the time, right? We're promoting all types of foolishness and nonsense. We're going to use these same mediums to promote righteousness, right? And to further this word. So verses that we can go to for this one, Psalms 133 and verse 1. Psalms 133 and verse 1, which reads, behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. See that? It's a good and pleasant thing for brethren to dwell together in unison. In unity. Whether it's 2 here or 5 here or 20 here or 200 there or 7 here, or 17 over there, right? That we dwell together in unity. It's a beautiful thing. As opposed to there being discord between brethren, for one cause or another. Once again, the law tells us we're going to have strivings with each other, right? For things we do, things we say. It's going to happen. The key is, what does Scripture say as far as how to resolve it? That's the issue. That's the challenge. Also, Hebrews chapter 10. Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 25. Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 25, which reads, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as ye see the day approaching. See that? Once again, I know I get it sometimes, that antisocial spirit. Even my old man, I just like to be alone sometimes. But it says, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, right? Coming together for different causes, for righteousness, right? It says, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as the manner of some is. It says, but exhorting one another. How ironic, right? But exhorting one another, it is like edifying one another with the truth. And so much the more as ye see the day approaching. The day talking about the day that Christ is coming back. We're getting closer to. As well as Hebrews chapter 13 in verse 16. You write that one down too. Hebrews chapter 13 in verse 16. Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 16, which reads, but to do good and to communicate, forget not. For with such sacrifices, God is well pleased. You see that? So it's looked at as like an offering that you do unto the Most High, right? By doing good, the goodness of God in truth, communicating God's righteousness in truth, right? These things are good things. These things are righteous things. These things are considered sacrifices, right? There's a scripture, I think, in Hosea. I don't have it on the list here, but let's write it down since we're talking about it. That echoes this. This is Hosea chapter 14 in verse 2. You can say it's a bonus scripture for the same principle. Hosea chapter 14 and verse 2, which reads, take with you words and turn to Yahweh. Say unto him, take away all iniquity and receive us graciously. For so will we render the calves of our lips. You see that? So it's like a metaphor, right? Hosea is talking about the calves, like you offering like a offering, like a burnt offering, right? Or a peace offering, like an animal. But he says, render the calves of our lips. So he's looking at these words, this communication, as an offering, right? When you tell your brother, sister the truth, when you edify your brother, sister about the truth, you don't just, keep it into yourself, like we see a lot of times out of camp, right? Especially when it comes to the elderly brothers and sisters, right? Where we're out there teaching, they go, that's good, brother. I know that already, right? And that we'll call them out on it, right? What do you know, brother? What do you know, sister? Tell us, right? We want to know what the older generation has to say, because I'm learning this through the Spirit, but how come folks in my family didn't tell me this about who we are while we're in a lower state, right? That we're the people that's in the Bible, that we're under a curse from God. How come no one told me that? And if you know this, why aren't you spreading the word, right? Because folks are looking up to you guys. But once again, scriptures tell us this too. Great men are not always wise, neither do the aged understand judgment, right? Just a quick reference I'm making to, I think it's Job 32 and 9. You have to get it. You just write it down, but that's what it says there. Pretty much lets us know, even though it should be that way, it's not always the case, right? The elderly don't always have the answers. Sometimes living a whole life and experience different things, people still don't learn the truth. But now having the truth and going through those same experiences, just how much more powerful is that going to make that brother, that sister, and what they can offer to others, right? As opposed to a brother or sister who had a bunch of experiences, they can share those experiences, but they don't have the truth as their foundation. So the why behind what they went through, they're usually clueless. Or the why behind what they've been through their whole life, they might guess at it. And they might be right, they might be wrong. More than likely wrong. Okay. So, yeah, that's it on that one. So let's go to number 5. Hopefully, it'll only be another 10 minutes. We don't have too many left. So number 5 is fast at least once a month. Fast at least once a month. Could you do more than that? Yeah. But I say for starters, just once a month, right? It shouldn't be a thing where, it's only the Day of Atonement where you fast. Where it's just, Day of Atonement's here. Time to get ready, right? Time to get ready to punish myself for 24 hours, right? Because you tell somebody, from sundown to sundown, you can't eat or drink. They go, whoa. I think we had that last Sabbath at camp. We're going into different laws because the brother wanted to know more about the laws. We were talking about fasting, talking about the Day of Atonement. So folks can, they don't have a problem when it comes to, Islam and Ramadan, where you just fast during the daytime and then break the fast at night and do that. But when it comes to a full sundown to sundown fast, that's like, oh boy. We see in scriptures where we did 3 days, right? Like Esther and her companions that were in the palace. She had the other Jews do it too, like Mordecai. You about brothers doing a whole week of fasting, 3 weeks. And then of course you have the rarest of the rare. We only see what? Christ, Elijah, and I think Moses. They're the ones that you read about that did the 40-day fast, right? I say start small, just one day, and 1 day a month. That way, when the Day of Atonement comes around in the fall, you already practiced in this 4th month, the 5th month, and the 6th month. When the 7th month comes around in the fall, the Day of Atonement comes around, you're like, oh, okay, I've at least practiced 1 day each one day this whole summer. Now the fall is here, never keeping those holy days. I should be ready because I've already gotten used to it, And then once you do 1 day, you could try out a day and a half or 2 days, and then from 2 days to 3 days, right? However far you want to go, but at least once a month is a good practice. So for number 5, fast at least once a month. You can write down Exodus 34. Exodus 34. In verse 28. This is the Moses example. So Exodus 34 and 28, it says, and he was there with Yahweh 40 days and 40 nights. He did neither eat bread nor drink water. Let you know that the fast is no food or water. Not like in the world where they say, oh, I'm doing the Daniel fast. Then you look at what the Daniel fast is. It's a diet. It's not a fast. A diet's good, but it's not. Just don't call it a fast, because a fast is no food or water, right? Or I'm doing a fast where I only drink fluids or only eat vegetables. That's a diet. Once again, that's not a fast, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with doing that for a certain reason, for a certain purpose, but just don't call it fast. He did neither eat bread nor drink water, and he wrote upon the tables the words of the commandment, the 10 Commandments. See? I think this is the second time around, right? Because I think you're reading in Exodus, he did it on more than one occasion. because the first ones, remember, he threw those down when he saw Israel wilding out when he came down from the mountain. That was back in chapter 32. It says Moses broke the commandments in anger because he said, "Man, I left you guys for 5 weeks and 5 days." That's another way to count 40 days. 5 weeks and 5 days, right? I left you guys for a little while, and I come down here, and you guys are down here wilding out with the golden calf, right? So, as mad as Moses was, imagine how the Most High felt. But let's get this one too. Let me see here. I don't have it on my list, but let me add it since I mentioned Elijah. So this is 1 Kings. Okay, here we go. 1 Kings chapter 19. This is when Elijah was on a run from Ahab's Zidonian wife, Jezebel, right? Usually hear Jezebel, people usually use it for sisters. But in the scripture, she was actually a heathen woman. She was a Hamite from Zidon, which is one of the children of Canaan. And we know she was a wicked woman. You read her story. But 1 Kings chapter 19 and verse 8, just for what we're talking about. Like I said, I'm not trying to go into the whole story, just going through the principles here. 1 Kings 19 and 8, it says, "And he, what you read is Elijah, arose and did eat and drink, and went in the strength of that meat 40 days and 40 nights unto Horeb, the mount of God." So when he was on the run, he had this one meal that the angels fixed him. You read above, the angels prepared a meal for him when he was under a juniper tree, asleep. And after he ate that meal, he went 40 days and nights. So he did this too. All right. So once again, 1 Kings 19 and 8. It's like a bonus scripture because I don't have that on the list here. But as far as fasting, at least once a month, Ezra chapter 8 and verse 21. Ezra 8 and 21. Ezra chapter 8 and verse 21, it reads, "Then I proclaimed a fast there. The I is Ezra," right? He was of the house of Aaron, right? He kind of played the role of the high priest for us at that time. Those of us that were going back into Israel after being captive under the Persians and Medes. He says, "I proclaimed a fast there at the river of Ahava, that we might afflict ourselves before our God." Showing that fast was used to afflict yourself, right? For your God, so that you can draw closer to him, to be increased in your fruit of the spirit, right? So a fast is like denying your physical wants to attain your spiritual wants. I should say wants and needs too. To attain your spiritual wants and really needs, because we need the spirit to really truly live. That we might afflict ourselves before our God, to seek of him a right way for us, for our little ones and for all our substance. Right? So Ezra had the right idea as far as guiding the people, trusting in the Most High, and using a fast to do that, to show the Most High that we're serious. Him and those that were with him at that time. Now here's Esther. I was talking about this earlier. Esther chapter 4 in verse 16, just like we read Exodus 34:28, where it says, "No food or water." Esther 4 and 16 tells us that too. It's right before Job is Esther. I know it's hard to find sometimes. Esther chapter 4 in verse 16, it says, Go gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye from me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also, my maidens, will fast likewise. So will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. That law being the law of the Persians and Medes. You can only go unto the king unless he held out the scepter and granted you that request. But see what she says here. Fast, eat nor drink. Rather, neither eat nor drink, showing you there's both eating or drinking. You can't do it when you fast. Also, let's get this one now. We did that because wicked Haman, that the Amalekite, was passing laws to what? Have us executed through the Medo-Persian Empire. He was a high official too in that other kingdom, trying to sabotage us. So, as far as the people doing it, you can write down Jonah chapter 3 and verse 5 as well. Jonah chapter 3 and verse 5. I won't go into the whole story. Just read the part where it says that they fasted. It says, Jonah 3 and 5. So the people of Nineveh believed God and proclaimed a fast, put on sackcloth from the greatest of them even to the least of them. Right? So they fasted at this time, right? So yes, the law is given to Israel, but like the scriptures say, sin is our approach to any people. To Israel, yes, but also to the heathen as well. Now, if you see a heathen or a group of heathen try to serve our God, right? Don't get in the way of that. That's a good thing. Also, I'll read verse 7. It says in Jonah 3 and 7, and he caused to be proclaimed and published throughout Nineveh by the decree of the king and his nobles, saying, let neither man nor beast, herd nor flock taste anything. Let them not feed nor drink water. So they were serious about this fast at this time. Right? When you read above and below, you'll get the whole gist behind this story, what was happening here. But you see them here. Fasting meaning what? No food or drink. Let's get another prophetess, a famous prophetess in the New Testament that did this too. Luke chapter 2 in verse 36. Luke chapter 2, 36, also verse 37, I want to read. Luke 2, 36, chapter 2, verse 36, it says, and there was one Anna, a prophetess, the daughter of Penuel of the tribe of Esther, which is just another spelling for Asher. Showing you that what? The northern kingdom, they left a while ago, but some were still there. She was an example of that. She was of a great age and had lived with an husband 7 years from her virginity. Then it says in verse 37, she was a widow of about 84 days. So in the law, it talks about a woman, if her husband dies, she's free to remarry. But depending on a woman, she may or may not decide to do so, right? That's her prerogative. If she doesn't want to, fine. If she does want to, fine, right? But then check out what it says towards the end of this verse. Which departed not from the temple, but served God with fastings and prayers, night and day. So we see she's already doing these principles we already read about, right? As far as pray at least 3 times a day. And as far as fast at least once a month. We see she's doing 2 of these at least, but we have this one here for the fasting. We can use her for that one too. So that's Luke chapter 2, 36 and 37 for Anna the prophetess of the tribe of Asher, right? Which today, if you don't know, they're the indigenous folks that you find mainly in the north and eastern countries in South America, right? Whereas the tribe that's on the west side and the south side of South America. That's the tribe of Naphtali or Naphtali. Those countries. So one more for this principle. We'll move on to number 6. And after that, we only got one more. So this is 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians chapter 11. Second Corinthians chapter 11. We just read this not too long ago in the Sabbath service, right? Verses 24. I'm going to start from 24. I'm going to read down to 27. So 2 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 24 reads, of the Jews 5 times received I 40 stripes save one. So Paul's going into the different afflictions that he suffered while doing this work, teaching the gospel, traveling different places. 40 stripes save one. Why? Because in our law, it talks about what? If you ever do capital punishment against an Israelite, right? Instead of, besides being put to death, we would give them lashes sometimes, depending on the transgression they did, right? But it tells you what? You shouldn't go above 40 lashes, lest your brother appeal vile unto you. Right? You read that in the law. That's what he's talking about when he makes that reference. So they wouldn't go above 40. So it's not like if you go beyond 40, it's almost like, it's like your brother's not an animal, right? You just whip him. By the time you get to 40 lashes, if you get that many, hopefully the lesson is learned, whatever transgression you did, to not do it again. Because who wants to get 40 lashes more than once, right? Hell, who wants to get that the first time for something they said or did? Let me read on. Thrice, 3 times, was I beaten with rods. Once was I stoned. Thrice I suffered shipwreck. A night and a day have I been in the deep. So Paul's been through some stuff, right? Imagine that, being shipwrecked out in the water, not being sure if anyone's going to come for help. It says, in journeyings often, in perils of waters, in perils of robbers, in perils of mine own countrymen, in perils by the heathen, in perils in the city, in perils in the wilderness, in perils in the sea, in perils among false brethren. See that? What did Christ say? Love your enemies, right? So he loved them, even though they were false towards him. And he found it afterwards and, adjusted accordingly. But he still taught them too, right? Until, a situation arose where they were exposed to be false, wronging him. It says in 27, which is where I'll stop, in weariness and painfulness, in watchings often, in hunger and thirst, in fastings often. There it is. See that? In fastings often. So he was constantly fasting. In cold and nakedness. So these principles I'm giving you guys, I'm not giving you anything that the scriptures already talk about that our forefathers and foremothers didn't already do, as far as them being effective principles to follow in this code of conduct. So now, the last 2 principles, those are more like direct. Now these next ones are kind of more indirect. These last 2, these are more like you kind of apply it to the situation. So number 6, number 7, right? Number 6 I have is if no one else is doing it, why don't you? In other words, if you see something, you're part of a congregation or you're trying to build a congregation, you see something that needs to be done, right? Or something that you might have the will to do. I think Kahan Samak was talking about this with the sister the other night, the other Friday night class. And you have a will or desire to do something good for Christ, for yourself or for whatever congregation you're a part of, right? Take that initiative and then just ask other fellow congregants for advice or support. If you need help in doing whatever that thing is that you want to do, to give back with whatever gift, be it physical or spiritual, the Most High has blessed you with. So that's what this is talking about. And then I put in brackets next to no one else is doing it, why don't you? Be proactive, not reactive, right? Being reactive is good. Being proactive is better. So for this principle, number 6, Luke chapter 19. Luke chapter 19, 12 down to 27. That's pretty long. But that whole parable pretty much is going into the parable of the talents. Right. Which I'll read through swiftly. It says, and he said, therefore, this is Christ giving this parable of the talents or the pounds. A certain nobleman went into a far country to receive for himself a kingdom and to return. And he called for his 10 servants and declared them 10 pounds. And said unto them, occupy till I come. But his citizens hated him and sent a message after him, saying, we will not have this man to reign over us. And it came to pass that when he was returned, having received the kingdom, that he commanded these servants to be called unto him, to whom he had given the money, that he might know how much every man had gained by trading. Then came the first, saying, Lord, thy pound have gained 10 pounds. He said unto him, well, thou good servant, because thou hast been faithful in a very little, thou authority over 10 cities. So that was his reward, right? By taking that initiative and taking that talent and multiplying it. And the second came, saying, Lord, thy pound have gained 5 pounds. And he said likewise to him, be thou also over 5 cities. Great. You turn 1 into 5, that's great too. You get 5 cities. But now the last one. And another came, saying, Lord, behold, here is thy pound, which I have kept laid up in a napkin. So he just held on to it. Why? 21 says, for I feared thee, because thou art an austere man. I think in the other gospel it says a hard man, right? But you get the idea. Thou takest up that thou layest not down, and reapest that thou didst not sow. So, you're an austere man, right? In other words, you got people pretty much working for you, right? You just the guy, you guide them, right? You're on that level, right? Yeah, as they say, you're a boss, right? You're not the employee, right? You know how to get things done. And you know how to help others, show others to get things done to make a profit. 22. And he said unto him, out of thine own mouth will I judge thee, thou wicked servant. Thou knewest that I was an austere man, taking up that I layest not down, and reaping that I didst not sow. Now he's telling this story, but you can put 2 and 2 together, that he's the austere man. And we as disciples are pretty much those that are trying to follow Christ to make good on the investment that he's entrusted in us as far as the Spirit. Wherefore then thou gavest not thou my money into the bank, that at my coming I might have required my own with usury. So he's saying at the bare minimum, you could have just took that talent, put it in the bank. I could have got that talent back with some usury or some interest. Just like you have certain accounts that'll bear compound interest. You just put a certain amount of money in there, they'll gain interest, right? So you have more when you come back to it. He told him that. You could have just put it there. You would have did even more, at least if he did that. And he said unto them that stood by, take from him the pound and give it to him that had 10 pounds. So he said, take the pound I gave him, give it to the guy that has 10. Because I already know he's going to do right by it. He's not just going to sit on it. And they said unto him, Lord, he had 10 pounds. But that's wise in what he said, because he's all about what? Multiplying his portfolio, right? His investment. He's going to give it to those he knows are worthy and that are going to do that. Now, 26 to 27 is where it gets a little direct. Based on that story, that parable, Christ says, for I say unto you, that to everyone which have shall be given, and from him that have not, even that he have shall be taken away from him. Then he says in verse 27, but those mine enemies which would not that I should reign over them, bring hither and slay them before me. Right? Now he went from the parable to now talking direct. So he's kind of talking about what's to come, not so much in this life, but what's coming in the future, right? But right now, what we do now determines whether or not we're going to be on that one side, right, of getting a return on our investment, or if we're going to be the ones that are going to be taken from, meaning our lives are going to be taken. In other words, 1/3 or the 2/3, right? are going to be a part of that 144,000. All right, so thanks for bearing with that parable. I know it was kind of long. Try to read through it swiftly and touch the key points. So now for this principle as well, Romans chapter 12 and verse 11. Thanks for bearing with us, those that are still on. So I just want to cover these last 2 points, and then we'll close out. At least that way you can, if you had to dial out before, you couldn't dial in tonight. At least you'll have it on record. You can go back to the video. You can play it by 1.5 speed if you want, so you can get all the scriptures. Hear it quicker too, that way, if you weren't able to watch the rest. There's a feature, I think, on these YouTube videos where you can just say play at 1.5 speed or 1.75 times 2 speed, right? It's going to go through a video quickly to get the key points. So Romans chapter 12 and verse 11, it says, not slothful in business, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, right? So you want to be slothful in business. Like we know in the world, if you're slothful in business, right? Whether you're a boss or an employee, right? Either your business is going out of business or someone's getting fired, right? Sometimes both, right? If somebody is slothful. So think about that when it comes to the truth, when it comes to saving souls, right? It's the same idea. 1 Corinthians chapter 9. That's why I have a lot of at least in these principles, because it's all about pacing, right? It's a long distance. You want to put in the work, of course. You want to pace yourself. You don't want to burn out. Because I've labored with brothers and sisters that were diligent, but they burned themselves out. They didn't pace themselves right, and then they lost wind, and they got discouraged, and now they're back in the world. So make sure you go at a comfortable pace so that you stay in. Because remember, we got to make it to the end. So 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Sorry, not 1 Corinthians. Oh, no. That's right. 1 Corinthians chapter 9. 7, I'm going to read down to 11. Showing you that, yeah, take initiative, but realize that the Most High is going to pay you in full, right? It may not come in the way that you expect, but he will reward you for your works. And the key is to always thank him, right? When you're up and when you're down, thank him, because it will come back around to you as long as you stay righteous. 1 Corinthians 9 in verse 7, it says, who goeth a warfare any time at his own charges? Who plants a vineyard and eateth not of the fruit thereof? Or who feedeth a flock and eateth not of the milk of the flock? Rhetorical questions, right? Of course, you're going to reap the benefits of the work that you put in. But when you're under a curse for disobedience, Most High told us that what? You're going to work, but then a heathen is going to eat what you got. He's going to take what you have, right? It tells you that in Deuteronomy 28, I think it's 26, right? But in a typical situation, yeah, you're going to actually get something for what you do. You don't just work for nothing, right? Whether you're a shepherd or a husbandman or a farmer, right? Whatever your profession is. Verse 8, say I these things as a man, or say not the law the same also? So is this not just a condition of man, to by the sweat of his brow shall he live, like he told Adam way back? But doesn't the law also say this too? And he's going to use an example, right? Verse 9, for it is written in the law of Moses, thou shalt not muzzle the mouth of the ox that treadeth out the corn. So there's a law even goes into when it comes to your beast of burden that you use to pull the plowshare. It says, don't muzzle his mouth, right? When you use him to plow the corn. It says, does God take care for oxen? So once again, it's a rhetorical question. The answer is yes. Because you read that law back in the law in the first 5 books of Moses, it tells you that because it says, for the ox is worthy of its reward, right? It should be able to eat because of the work that it puts in. So you don't just have your ox doing all the work and you just muzzle him where he can't even, eat a part of what he does, right? It says in verse 8, say I these things as a man. I read it already. Verse 10, or saith he it altogether for our sakes? So that's why we said the law, right? Which is the letter. We also have the spirit of the law, right? Which is the deeper meaning behind what the law says. So Paul's tapping into the spirit of that law to show how it can apply to our lives as men and women. That's why he says, or saith he altogether for our sakes, no doubt, this is written. He that ploweth should plow in hope. And he that thresheth in hope should be partaker of his hope. And I'll stop in verse 11 where it says, if we have sown unto you spiritual things, is it a great thing we should reap your carnal things? Once again, more rhetorical questions, right? The answer to all these is yes, 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 and yes again, right? Most God's not going to leave us out there. He's going to help us out. He's going to support us. He's going to deliver us from the temptations that we go through. Now, leading up to whenever we give our last breath in this life, or when Christ comes back, or whatever comes first. Our hope being, that it's sometime in this century. But we don't know. Most I could draw it out even further if you want it. But our hope is that what? Christ will come back before this century is over. But we can't say when, because Christ himself doesn't know. Anyway, let's continue on. This is Galatians, but that same principle about being proactive and not just reactive. Galatians chapter 6. Galatians chapter 6, verses 4 and 5. So Galatians 6 and 4. You guys are writing these down, right? Galatians chapter 6 and verse 4. It says, but let every man prove his own work, and then shall he have rejoicing in himself alone, and not in another. Verse 5, every man shall bear his own burden. Just like that parable, right? Everyone got a talent. It's up to them to see what they're going to do with that talent. Or that pound. What we're going to do with that pound. And then in verse 9, it says, Galatians chapter 6, verse 9 also, let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. See that? We got to stick to it. You may not see the crops come up yet, but depending on the crop, it may take a while. But once they start shooting up, you then feel that sigh of relief, like, oh man, I wasn't just spinning my wheels all this time. They say for farmers that grow bamboo, that's how it is, right? You plant the bamboo seeds, it's like a whole, like it takes like a whole period, almost like a whole year. You don't see anything, but then after like 9 or 10 months, however long it is, they just shoot up so quick. But it happens right away. But leading up to that point, especially if it's your first go around, you might be looking at the bamboo farmer that's teaching you like, what are we doing, man? Been like 2 seasons, going on the 3rd season. What's up with this bamboo? Right? We need this to use it for, whatever we're going to use the bamboo for. But once it finally comes up, it's like, oh, now it's a sigh of relief. Now you can have hope because you've witnessed it, right? You're no longer that doubting Thomas, so to speak. All right, so that's 6 and 9. I'm sure there's other plants that are like that too. But I remember just reading that in passing about how bamboo takes a while, but it shoots up right away once it starts going. Revelation 22, you can write for this one. Revelation 22 and 12. Revelations 22 and 12, which says, and behold, I come quickly. This is Christ speaking, red letters. And my reward is with me to give every man according as his work shall be. Right? So you gain based on what you do. Right? This is true meritocracy. It's not what man will say in the world. Yeah, meritocracy. You work hard, you get results. Man will say that, but then you won't always get results depending on what you're doing and how things are being managed. But when it comes to the kingdom, I know Khan Bakwa is a good proponent for talking about this concept. The Most High always pays out, and He pays in full for those that do this work. All right, and the last one, which is, no matter how hard it gets, you can deal with it. I keep it that simple. I say, no matter how hard things get, you can deal with it. In other words, no matter what your situation is, you can overcome. The Most High is never going to throw you a situation that you can't handle. You're not going to be at level 4 and then Christ sends you a class 9 devil, right, to challenge you. That's not going to happen. You got to keep dealing with level 4 issue, level 4 situation, level 4 devils, until you can maneuver them, resist that temptation, spar with them, and be able to hold your own. Then it's like, okay, he's ready. Now give him level 5. Then you start dealing level 5 situations, level 5 spirits. All right, level 6. But it's not going to be level 6 and then level 13 comes at you. And you're like, oh, and you give up the ghost. I'm going back in the world. It's like, the heck with this. I'm through. I'm offended. Like Christ said, right? Persecution arises because of the word, and they're offended. No, it's not going to happen like that. If you get offended, it's because of something that you're faced with that you can actually handle. You're just not willing to try. It's not like, oh, Most High gave me more than I can handle. Nope. That'll never happen in this system of following the commandments. Let's get scriptures, though, to back it up. Romans chapter 8. Romans chapter 8. In verse 18. Something always will keep you motivated, right? Verses like this. It says, "For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us." So looking back on these days of affliction, these temptations that we go through now in this kingdom, this wicked kingdom, when we get to the other side, on a kingdom side, we're going to look back on this like, wow, this actually happened? I can't believe this actually took place, right? This is so great what we have now compared to what we had to go through then. This will seem like small compared to all the great things we're going to be blessed with on the other side, right? Those taking that pound and making it into 10 pounds was rough, right? For that servant. But then when he got those 10 cities, it was like, oh, man. Whew. Man, I'm living large. I got 10 cities, you know? But when you were taking that town and making it 10, it was rough. It was tough, right? You had to hustle, bustle, problem solve, right? Figure things out. Once you got the reward, it's like, they didn't feel that bad anymore, right? Because look what I got now because of the work I put in. So yeah, Romans 8 and 18. Also, 1 Corinthians, this is the one I quote the most for this concept. I quote this one a lot at camp too. When you're talking to people for the first time and they're like, "Oh man, I hear what you're saying, brother, but I got all types of issues, man. I got all types of vices I'm trying to work through, man. I got to cut out my bad behavior." And you say, "Look, you can. You're able to. You're at that level to deal with whatever you're dealing with currently. You can overcome." Because, like we said, most times they're going to give you a challenge that's too much for you. Here's the proof. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, in verse 13, it says, "They had no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man." It says, "But God is faithful, who will not suffer you or allow you to be tempted above that ye are able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape. You may be able to bear it." That's what I was saying earlier. Same thing. As far as you're at level 3, you're going to get level 3 challenges, situations, temptations, right? Until you master level 3, then you go to level 4 and you get level 4 challenges. It's like boxing. You're not going to put a welterweight in a king with a heavyweight and in a ring with a heavyweight and say, "Go at it, son." You're not going to do that, right? And even before the match, you're going to make sure, okay, what's his record? What's he been doing? Okay, let me make sure my training is on par, right? My jump rope, my speed bag, my running, whatever I'm doing to get ready for that fight, that conditioning. All right, so that's 1 Corinthians 10 and 13, another winner. Also, 2 Corinthians, this one's kind of like Romans 8 and 18 a little bit. 2 Corinthians 4 and 17. 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 17, it says, For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, worketh for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. Check that out. So our light affliction is but for a moment. This is temporary, what we're going through right now. What we're going to get in the kingdom is going to be forever. So we go through the hardship of getting those, making those 10 pounds now to enjoy those 10 cities later. If we faint not. So 2 Corinthians 4:17. All right, last two verses, and then we can wrap up. Thanks for hanging in there, guys. But once again, like I said, we got this thing recorded, so you could just watch it and go back through it again if you had to dial out earlier. So this is 2 Timothy chapter 2. Second Timothy chapter 2 in verse 3, which reads, "Now therefore endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ," or Yahushua HaMashiach. See that? So we're soldiers in this, but spiritual, right? The things we're up against, not like soldiers up against physical threats, right? But we're up against spiritual threats that you can't see. But we have to be just as strong, if not stronger. Actually stronger. There's no scripture in Romans that talks about how we're more than conquerors through him that loved us, right? So more than the conquerors that history and current events look to, right? From your Genghis Khans to your Napoleons to your Alexander the Greats to your Hannibal Barcas, right? They done great things. But to be unstoppable, you got to be a part of this 1/3 of Israel that's going to be chosen, right? That's what makes you unstoppable. That's what makes you, like we read earlier in Daniel, like a star forever and ever. That's that high calling that only the few throughout the ages can attest. Verse 4, "No man that warreth entangled himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who hath chosen to be a soldier. And if a man also strive for masteries, yet is he not crowned, except he strive lawfully." See that? So this going into not only being a soldier, but how to be a soldier in righteousness, right? How to not get entangled with the affairs of this life. That's going into the seed that fell amongst the thorns. Remember we were talking about that earlier tonight, Yakazak?
No.
So getting entangled in the affairs of this life is the lust that come up in this world, right? That choke the word, you become unfruitful. That's that temptation you want to resist, right? Seed that fell amongst the thorns. So you'll deal with those things, but use those things to better yourself in righteousness, as opposed to let those things be a hindrance to your righteous progress. So that's 2 Timothy 2, 3-5, and then finally, and I read Hebrews earlier, but let me read this again. Hebrews chapter 12. Did I read this already? I think I did. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 11. Oh, no, I didn't read this. I'm going to read 11 down to 13. This will be our last verse for this last principle, and then we'll wrap it up, do the closing prayers.
Who's that again?
Hebrews chapter 12, verse 11 to 13. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 11. "Now no chastening for the present seemeth to be joyous, but grievous. Nevertheless, afterward it yieldeth the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby." So this verse I like because it addresses the reality, which is Hebrews chapter 12, verse 11 to 13. And I was saying I like this verse because this verse addresses the visceral, grittiness of what it is that we go through sometimes. It gets hard, right? Temptations, they'll knock you down, right? It might even knock you out. But the question is, are you going to wake up and get back up and go at it again, right? And it can hurt. It can get you to a point sometimes where you go somewhere alone. You just yell at the top of your lungs. That's how frustrated it can get sometimes when you're in His truth, trying to get certain things going. And you got these different roadblocks in your way that you read the scriptures to say, okay, I can deal with it. But in the heat of the moment, it may feel like, even though you know it's not true, it may feel like, oh, man, I can't handle this. Like I said, that's when you know you're going through affliction, when, you're pushed to a point where, you get to go somewhere in solitude somewhere and just yell at the top of your lungs, right? Due to frustration. But it says, it yield the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby. That's why it says in verse 12, wherefore lift up the hands which hang down and the feeble knees, right? So reading body language, right? The hanging down hands, the feeble knees, right? When you aren't motivated, your knees kind of knock, right? You don't really walk the same way. You don't walk with that same confidence. It says in verse 13, and make straight paths for your feet, lest that which is lame be turned out of the way, but let it rather be healed, right? So your spiritual hands, right? They function just like your feet. They function. Don't act like you're a lame where you can't do anything, like physically being a lame. But no, you want to be like your full body, right? You want that to be healed so that you can what? Go back at it. Try it again. Like I said, even if you got knocked out or knocked down or both, you wake up, you get up, and you go at it again. Because, like we read already, He'll never tempt you above that which you're able. But He will tempt you just to prove you. And even though this isn't part of any principles, but I guess we could add it to this list. And this will be the final hoorah. This is like the great motivating verse for why we do what we do in this truth. Romans. Romans chapter 8, 35 to 39. So you can add this next to the 8 and 18. It's in the same chapter, and this will be our last verse for tonight. 8:35. I'm going to read down to 39. 8 and 35 says, who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? As it is written, for thy sake we are killed all day long. We are counted as sheep for the slaughter, right? At the hands of our own people, definitely at the hands of the heathen, right? We're kind of like sheep for the slaughter, right? And we see it even to this day, all the different machinations and plots and schemes they use against us, right? To sabotage us, keep us from moving forward, from coming together, right? Nay, in all these things, we are more than conquerors through Him that loved us. Like I said, everyone talks about these great conquerors of times past, right? Some of them even are part of our forefathers, right? Some of them in righteousness, some of them not in righteousness, but tend to be the ones that aren't in righteousness to get the most accolades, right? I mentioned some earlier, like your Attila the Huns, or your Genghis Khans, or your Alexander the Great, or your Hannibal Barcas, right? Or your Napoleons, like these other, these conquerors everyone looks up to, right? But what about those that fight this quiet war? That's that much more important to overcome the flesh, to overcome temptation. Even those great despots didn't overcome those things. That's why He says, we are more than conquerors through Him that loved us. It says in 38, for I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come. So things here, things that are to come, nor beings that are above and beyond us, right? The principalities, the powers, the ones that preside over world events, right? And over governments, those principalities that we talk about, spiritual beings that the heathen get their power from, sometimes in ignorance, sometimes knowingly. They can't even prevent us. It says in 39, nor height, nor depth, nor any creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord, or the love of Allahia, which is in Mashiach Yahushua, Adonai, our Lord. So nothing can separate us from that love. So not angels on the right hand or left hand of God, nor creatures, even mighty creatures like the behemoth or the Leviathan, as mighty as they are, right? They can't even separate us from the love of God, which is in Mashiach Yahushua. All right. So we need to be reminded of that last reading in Romans when it comes to we can deal with whatever comes our way because nothing can separate us from this love. So this is just another key verse to seal the deal, to confirm that understanding, to know it, to when you're in that situation when it gets rough, you're reminded of it and you use that to press forward. All right, so that's the code. You know, there's other laws, of course, but those are the key laws that I arranged in 7 in particular, that just by doing those alone, you'll find that your situation will change and change for the better sooner than later. And if you're already doing these 7 things already, you can already attest to that truth. And you can be confident that the scriptures back that up too. It's not just some man that said it, or some motivational speaker that told you this, right? But it's actually coming from the scriptures themselves. So here's your righteous motivation, right? So we'll make an end here, and we'll say a Shah Kadash once again. And like I said, if you had to tune out sooner than later, if you weren't able to tune in tonight, you have to go back to this video, review those principles, really question, am I doing these at least? And if I am doing these at least, how much more can I do, right? And then take note of not only of your activity when it comes to doing these at least, but then the activity of the Most High in response to your activity in bettering yourself in righteousness by applying these righteous principles, right? However you may do them in your life. As we get closer and closer to that day, Christ makes the second coming. Okay, so most times we'll talk to everybody in the Friday class that's coming up next. And with that, we'll say a Shah Kadash once again, Happy New Moon, and we'll do the closing prayers. So Shah Kadash and Laila Tawab with his good night. And let's close it out. Yeah, that's what I was. Barakatha Yahweh by Shemi Hawashai, Asharanat Nanawa Paria Gapan Tuada Aman. La Yahweh by Shemi Hawashai, Yashala. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the fruit of the vine. Thank you, so be it. To Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, with Israel. Amadwa, Panywa, Yerushalayim, stand and face Jerusalem. Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Babakushai, Shemai, Lanawa, Aitha, Yemyan, Aitha, Shalak, Micah Allah, Walla Allahayim, Tazwadakim, La, Shemar Al, Barak, Rapah, Magan, Wa Chaziyak, Banya, Yasha Allah, Wa Shalak, Lanawa, Rabian, Kakama, Rabian, Da'if, Rabian, Bayanad, Rabian, Sabalanwaf, Rabian, Amawan, Rabian, Aqua, Rabian, Ahabian, Rabian, Haganad, Rochanaya, Wasalak, Kal, Katayanawa, La Akim, Wa Akiwa, Wayashala, Thamyad, Wawalam, Basham, Yahawashai, Thawada, Aman. English translation, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, please listen to us now, right now. Send Michael and the righteous powers to watch over, bless, heal, protect, and make strong the children of Israel. And send to us much wisdom, much knowledge, much understanding, much patience, much faith, much brotherhood, much love, much spiritual protection, and forgive all our sins. For the brothers, sisters in Israel, always and forever, in the name of Yahweh Shai, thank you, so be it. Prayer for the food. Yahweh, Gadawo, Basham, Madawanya, Yahweh Shai, Babakusha, Barak, Makau, Yanawa, Shatayawath, Yanawa, Yayan, Yanawa, Lacham, Yanawa, Shakarai, Yanawa, Zakhat, Shal HaChadash, Basham, Yehoshua, the water, Aman. Yahweh, Basham, Yahushai, Barak Nawe, Weashala, Wabathia Saparium, Shemai, Yasharule, Yahweh, Allah, Yahweh, Yahweh, Achet. All right, with that, we'll say a Shar Kadash once again, which is Happy New Moon. Have a blessed day today. Try to enjoy the new moon as best you can. Try to apply grace if you have to. If you have to work, still try to enjoy this day in holiness. And most of us will talk to everybody in the Friday class next. So Shalom, wa laila tuam. Akim, Amawa, Barakwa, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai Brakathum. Judgment time. Shakadah. There you go. Shakadah.
Another beginning of the month.
Come.